Do your RPG characters suck? And if they do, what can we do to make them more engaging? That and more right now. Characters are a big part of tabletop RPGs. In fact, you could say they're the biggest part. And when they suck, it can drain the life right out of your game. Better, more engaging characters can help make your game just a little bit more awesome. While this is important for player characters, these tips are useful for NPCs too. In fact, they may be more important for NPCs. So let's get started. So what makes a character engaging? A lot of this depends on the group, but here are my observations over many decades of gaming and playing at untold dozens of tables. Engaging characters are effective at something, they have personality, usually in spades, they have strong beliefs even if they don't act accordingly, they are multidimensional and usually flawed in some inescapable way, and they evolve over time. There's one more, but we'll get to that later. Now let's take these apart, shall we? And don't worry, we'll get to actionable stuff later in the video. The best characters do things. I believe the best people do things too, and I don't think that's a coincidence. Engaging characters tend to be effective at something, usually really effective at something. And that something could be anything. And as much as I hate to say it, they might be good at planning. Engaging characters are sometimes effective in combat, but I think that's the least interesting thing they could be effective at. You look like you could use an example. I'm a GM. I can tell. Critical Role fans will recognize one of Scanlan's things right away. He was super good at running scams. Swansong's Mr. Sicarian was particularly effective at escalation, usually with violence. Judge from the Chain of Akron is great at acting decisively. Go watch the stream if you don't believe me. Moving on. Engaging characters have personality, usually revolving around one or more traits. We see this in movies and TV all the time. Captain Jack Sparrow's eccentricity, for example, James Bond's unshakable cool, Inigo Montoya's single-mindedness, or Princess Leia's kick-assedness. While each of these characters are engaging in their own way, characters in RPGs can and should be just as engaging. In fact, they should be more engaging since we spend so much more time with them. Think about it. A character in a movie might be on screen for a couple of hours, if they're lucky. If we play 10 sessions of a game, a PC might have 30 hours of screen time or more. And if your campaign runs for years, just think about how much space we have to explore. It is my opinion that great characters typically have strong beliefs. Again, we're going to lean on TV and movies for examples. Luke Skywalker holds on to the unpopular belief that there's still good in Anakin. Inigo Montoya believes he'll find the six-figured man and avenge his father someday. Captain Kirk believes there's always a way out. Jack Sparrow believes in freedom and will go to great lengths to get it. And that's the real point. A belief isn't just a thing to wax poetic about. It's what drives a character to heroism or tragedy. It's the fuel for a lot of what makes RPGs great. And for the next part, I'm going to glom a couple of those ideas together. Engaging characters are rarely one-dimensional, and it's often through their flaws that we get to realize their depth. Great characters can start as stereotypes or archetypes, but they usually don't end there. There's usually something unexpected, some nuance that makes them stand out. Grog from Critical Role has a 6 intelligence, and while he isn't the brightest bulb in the closet, it doesn't entirely define him. It would be really easy to play the big dumb guy as a stereotype, but Travis plays him with guts, humor, and most of all, heart, even if Grog doesn't show it all the time. This is what endears a character to us. And that brings us to our next bit, flaws. Slim from the Chain of Akron doesn't back down, which is awfully Marty McFly of him. There's a great segment in one of Colville's recap videos where he's apprehensive that Slim is going to walk into a challenge that he can't possibly win and be killed to death. While it might not be obvious that this is a flaw, it can be played up to increase the drama, which is what we expect from an engaging character. Great characters evolve over time. In literature, we call this a character arc, and there's absolutely no reason that our RPG characters can't have them too. When I first started watching Critical Role years ago, I was amazed by how much Percy grew throughout the Briarwood arc in their first campaign. Most of the characters in Critical Role do this, but in my opinion, Percival's was the best played. Many games put mechanics around the growth and evolution of their characters, not the least of which is Burning Wheel, where we expect a character's beliefs to be challenged in very dramatic ways. It's awesome to see characters grow as they encounter, succumb, and overcome their challenges. It's even better when it's us players that can learn from these situations. And if that was all there was to it, we'd just make a checklist and we'd be done, right? We'd just set up our recipe and away we go into great character land. But it's never that easy, is it? All of these aspects we've talked about are important, but I don't think they're all necessary, not for every character. A lot of it depends on the game and the other players at the table. But I think you could do a heck of a lot worse than starting with these points. Along more practical lines, here's some stuff that might help. Think through your character's mannerisms, physical stance, and/or accent should you choose to do one. Do they have a catchphrase? Try to find a quirk or something memorable that you can lean into, although note that there's a very small difference between memorable and annoying. We all bring ourselves to our characters regardless of what the specifics might be, and that's cool. No two characters will be identical, even if they have the same stats. The actor always brings something to the role. When I make a new player character, I want to establish a few things first. First, I want a hook or a concept, usually something simple. Second, I want a reinforcement or counter to the hook or concept. Third, I want a strong belief related to the first two if I can swing it. Once I have that, I want to figure out how they got there. I want to work backwards to figure out what their life path looks like. The details in this case aren't quite as important as getting a solid platform to play from. But remember, the best character concept means nothing if not displayed through action at the table. No one cares if I write a 30-page backstory. It only matters if we see it in play. Need some examples? Alright. Example number 1. Koldo the Paladin. The hook is a wandering holy warrior trying to do right in a broken world. We've all heard this one. The next piece is counter. Koldo hates the church. This is especially fun because it gives us a theme for the group to explore. Counterpoints are often obvious places to build drama. Next, the belief. The church is corrupt and has lost its way. How the heck did Koldo arrive here? This is where the fun is. The human brain can resolve all kinds of non sequiturs if we just let it work. As long as it's plausible or at least well played, it will generally work at the table. Back to Koldo. He performed some action, in his eyes justly, but someone in the church felt otherwise and had him excommunicated. Maybe it was a rival or someone wanting to further their own position. This gives a reason for his wandering. He might be leaving his past behind, or might be running away as a fugitive. It also gives a strong belief that a GM can work into the narrative. What happens when a member of Koldo's church shows up? What if we find out that Koldo's a wanted man? How come he hasn't lost his powers? Clearly his deity doesn't share the church's opinions. If I were playing Koldo, I'd be looking for an arc of redemption, either in the eyes of the church or in the eyes of those around. I'd play up the good deeds and try to find ways they could be misinterpreted by rivals to crank up the drama. The temptation is to fill in all these blanks during character creation, but it's way cooler to leave space for us to fill in later. For instance, we didn't specify what Koldo did to get him excommunicated. We did this on purpose to leave some space to explore. Once we've played the character for several sessions, we may have a better idea of what this might have been. Another temptation is to keep all the secrets to ourselves and to never talk about them. If we do this, they may as well not exist. Remember, the only things that really matter are the things we see in play. If you're going to keep a secret, pick a really good one, and then reveal it at a reasonably dramatic time. Heck, let some of the other players in on the act too. Let them help build that dramatic moment. Let's go with this thing in author stance. And if you need a reminder about author stance, blam. Example number 2, Orc Solo. The hook is an orcish Han Solo, a recalcitrant and reluctant hero. The next piece is aligned, if unexpected. Orc Solo is a charismatic, smooth-talking scoundrel. Orc Solo's belief is that magic is unreliable and that wits and martial skill will always see you through. How'd he get there? We can imagine a young Orc Solo smuggling illicit goods of all sorts between cities in the kingdom, right under the guards' noses. Tempted by illusion magic on many occasions in the past, but always foiled, having to fight his way out, Orc Solo now lives by his clever words and the power of his sword arm. If I were playing this character, I'd be on the lookout for times where magic went wrong, so I could quip about it. I might strike up a rivalry with a magic user in the party and look for a character arc where he starts to accept that magic has its place. If this were a game with bonds from award-winning tabletop role-playing game Dungeon World, I'd for sure set up a bound around this. I'd also be on the lookout for places where I could talk my way out of things to help reinforce the mystique of the smooth-talking smuggler. Example number 3, Ainara of the Violet Robes. The hook is a mage-hunting magic user. The next piece is counter. She used to believe that magic was for the betterment of all, but now believes that magic is too dangerous to allow the undisciplined to wield. How the heck did she get here? A fresh-faced Ainara joins the magic college in her youth. She gains power quickly and upon graduation goes on her way to prove that magic can be an amazing boon. Unfortunately, some magically induced tragedy befalls her. Maybe another magic user torches her village before she can intervene. But if we really want to crank up the drama, perhaps it was Ainara herself that destroyed her village. Thus, her naive younger self is consumed by rage. Now she tirelessly hunts those that wield arcane power irresponsibly. Poor Ainara's had it pretty rough, and could be played as a character looking for redemption or revenge. I would pick one of those and lean into that arc as the character progressed. There are tons of directions this could go, and I'd leave some of the darker details until later when I knew the character better. In general, I like to start simple with the intent that the character will evolve over time. If it's a long-term game, I like to pick a few beliefs and flaws to give the character some initial depth. I prefer to leave space to discover who the character is, and in this way I can help the character fit the group better. Bonus points if I can play into or against other characters' arcs. That's right, we're back in author stance. I want to figure out why this character is the way that they are, and the more extreme the circumstance, the more interesting the reasons tend to be. During the course of play, I want to pull on whatever threads seem most interesting. So far, we've talked mainly about player characters, but this works for NPCs too. Here are some of the notable differences. NPCs' wants should not be complicated. They just plain don't get the screen time for it. Furthermore, we don't want them to outshine the PCs. Well, at least not that often. We really only need a couple of details about them, and I wouldn't make it more than 3 unless you're fairly certain they're sticking around. And might I remind you that we really don't know how long an NPC is going to be around. Player characters are freaking dangerous. No matter what you write, none of it matters if it doesn't show up in play. Like before, I don't care how intricate your backstory is if those things never manifest themselves at the table. Like player characters, we need the space to mold NPCs to the needs of the game and the particular group. I think Adam Coble, a master of this kind of stuff, said it best. Come to the table more curious than prepared. One of my favorite NPCs from last campaign was Zarashi, better known as one of the stars of episode number 4. Blam. I started with these things. A physical description, he's a cheetah anthropomorph with interesting scars and a mangled ear. An accent, he sounds like the Khajiit from Skyrim. A little bit about his personality, despite being deeply broken, he still manages to show a sunny side. And a tie to the cult the PCs were dealing with. He would be serving as informant to the party. How did he get there? He had a lot of personal information about them, so it made sense that he'd encountered them before, perhaps many times. His scars and mangled ear, I decided, were the result of his nearly deadly encounters with them in the past. This worked in both directions. The cult didn't need to look far for a reason to hate Zarashi. He'd murdered one of their officers. While the personal ties between Zarashi and that cult never really manifested, the space left open allowed me to improvise some really fun stuff. At one point on watch, I described Zarashi writing in a book. I just needed something for him to do, so he wasn't just sitting there. Later, the group would find out this was a diary. A couple of sessions later, after a painfully long bout of planning, one of the players said something to the effect of, "I think we've heard a lot of good ideas." To which Zarashi quipped, "I think we've heard a lot of ideas." This was a defining moment for the character, and cemented his personality in my mind. Up until that point, I didn't think Zarashi was sarcastic, but because I'd left space to explore, he now could be. Fast forward to a future session's dramatic recap, done in the voice of one of Zarashi's diary entries. It was a mix of optimism and sarcasm, masking an undercurrent of dread, which was well received by my players. When the campaign ended, I was struck by sadness when I realized I might not ever get to play Zarashi again. GMs can get just as attached to their characters as players do. I hope that you found something useful in here, and I hope that your next character is as awesome as I know they can be. Got any good tips for creating better characters? Drop us a line in the comment section below. But that's enough for one video. Shoo, I'll see you on Sunday.